officially calling the PAB meeting to order. There's my gavel bang. So I'm going to start off by saying we're going to be recorded today. So I have my marching orders from the IT department here at the county. Make sure that if you're going to be speaking, that you're in front of a mic so it can pick you up. And also bear in mind that this room, unlike Vegas, anything that you say is also getting picked up. So if you have any fun comments, maybe save them until you're out of the building. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I just want to get started quickly. I've got Tom Baird here from the ACC, and I'm very glad he is here because he's going to help me when I start telling you about our recent training that we had. So I'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to, first of all, establish a quorum. So I'll have the PAB members just state your name for the record, and we'll go from there. So
Stephen Miller.
Thank you.
Ian Shaw.
Lisa Knight.
Stacy Schaefer, and absent is Jeremy Willett, who is out of the country currently and not available for the meeting. So we have established our quorum. And I would like the PAB members to take a look at the minutes that we had from the March 6th meeting. Are there any corrections, any additions, any comments, any needs to modify those in any way from any of you that you observed? Any updates?
I think they looked good to me.
All right,
Make a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved from the last meeting. Before I turn to the on and off of the glasses, just excuse me, because I can't see anything close up, and then when I look out, I can't see any of you, so I'm gonna be doing that all day. I just wanted to kind of bring the law enforcement agencies and the PAB up to speed as to what the charging committee has done since our last quarterly meeting. So we have had our training down at the State Police Academy training facility down in Sykesville. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And we have also had our first case review. And that was a case from that was generated from the Sheriff's Department. So I'll talk very briefly about that without any salient details. So that all the law enforcement agencies know, and I know Sheriff DeWeese knows this and Colonel Hart knows this because I'm sure they've had some contact with Lieutenant Devilbiss with regard to that first case. But our training was, I don't know, I can't speak for the other members of the ACC, but when I was first confronted with you've got a 40 hours of mandatory training all week long, you know, it's like, oh God, what's this going to be like? Because I've been through plenty of legal seminars that, you know, by the end of the day, you're kind of like, ah. But I was very pleasantly surprised. And so I'm going to share some of my reflections, and then I'll ask Tom to kind of jump in and give us some of his impressions from it. But they did a very nice job of, first of all, it was incredibly well organized. Just the logistics of it, which I'm sure, now we had the benefit of not being among the first group that they had trained. I suspect that was a process of working all of that out. But it was just very well handled from the get-go. The communication back and forth was good. They let us know the expectations. They were open to any comments that we had. So it was a good setup. All of the folks that were trainers were excellent. They all, first of all, they knew how to talk to a group of people and keep them engaged. But the content, it's clear that they knew what they were talking about, and they were able to convey that information in the confines of that 40 hours in a way that was very helpful, at least from my perspective. So each day we had like a different setup. So the first day was kind of focused on sort of the rules of the road, COMAR regulations, the trial board process. We had a speaker present on internal affairs from the law enforcement agency standpoint. The next day we worked on some de-escalation tactics that are taught, through the academy process. So we were made aware of that. We took a look at some body-worn camera footage, and then we discussed that. Parts of that were kind of fun. And they made an effort to make it enjoyable as well as while you were learning, because, that's just a smart way to do it. Anyway, so the third day, we talked a lot about, we did some crisis intervention discussion, implicit bias discussion, and that was very helpful. The fourth day, we did the lab portion of the week, and we had a
Virtual reality.
yeah, we had virtual reality, but before we did that, we had these headphones on that were designed to kind of give us the experience of what it's like from the standpoint of someone who has schizophrenia. So we were literally hearing the voices in our head while we were trying to do other things and navigate the world. I'm pretty tuned into mental health stuff just through my job and through being a mediator and all of that. But that was a real eye-opening experience, and I thought it was a very well-done one. And then the virtual reality was, again, really interesting. So they put us, each one of us individually, in the shoes of an officer at the scene of some incident. And they gave us a little breakdown as to what was going on. And then they just let us work through that scenario. And it was fascinating. And then we each came back and immediately wrote down our impressions of it. I'll share with you my funny story, but I'll let Tom talk after I'm done yammering here. And then the last day, we got together in our individual ACC groups, and they gave us 2 different cases to review, and we had to work through that and come up with our recommendation. So by the end of the week, the 5 of us from Carroll spent lunch basically together every day. So while the training itself was fabulous, the other part that was really fabulous was we got to know each other really well and figure out our strengths and our weaknesses and what we bring to the discussion as an ACC. So overall, I have nothing but glowing reports for that training process. And the only thing that concerns me is going forward when they start having ACC members kind of rotating on and off boards, they won't have that same degree of everyone being there at the same time. And I think that's an added benefit. So that's just my little brief review of that training session. I'm going to swing back to Tom in a minute when I go through some other stuff. Further updates, we had our first monthly ACC meeting, and we had one case that was presented by Lieutenant Devilbiss. That process is going to it will evolve over time as we get more tech support through the county, as we get individual email addresses to make it easier to disseminate information and that sort of thing. But I thought, and I'll let Tom speak to this too, I thought that first case went really well. Lieutenant Devilbiss did a great job presenting it. He had all the video footage from the cameras that was very helpful, to add in. And so we were pretty well prepared and we reached our decision, as a collaborative effort, and I think that whole process went pretty well. And then we, of course, through Tim, sent that information back to the Sheriff's Department to then decide whether they were going to add to or decrease, and I don't know the answer to that, but I don't need to know the answer to that. So that went very well. The next monthly meeting of the ACC is the 21st at 9 o'clock. If none of the other law enforcement agencies, I'll poll you all later and see if anybody's got anything in the hopper. But if we don't actually have a case to review, even if we do have a case to review, we're going to have an administrative meeting where we polish up our rules of policy and procedure and get those kind of formalized. We're working on formalizing the confidentiality agreement that we're going to have available to all the agencies, as so that we can ensure from your perspective that all the documents and information that you're sharing with us during those case reviews are kept secure. So those are all working parts of the ACC involvement. So I'm going to let Tom give us his impressions of our training and our first meeting and fill in the holes that I'm undoubtedly left.
Yeah, I had the same impression, if you've served in the military or in government agencies, there's always training you hear about, and usually it's boring. And
Right.
Agreed.
Agreed.
40 hours of sitting in a classroom is a lot. But the instructors were all, experienced police officers, state police, county police, other agencies. So they all had dealt with this stuff for quite a while. Plus they had the experience of running about 3 or 4 classes. So we literally had, I think, 3 kind of different counties represented around the state. So it was good as we got into the training a little bit further. From the first couple of days, I think at the last meeting here, I recall that there was a lot of concern about every little thing that happens has to come to the ACC. And I think we found that that's not really the case, because the cases that come to us are the ones that involve police misconduct as defined by some violation of the U.S. state constitution, state law, or regulations that involves a member of the public. So it has to meet those 2 tests before it comes to us. And the other situation we found is that simple cases, even if they do involve a member of the public, could go to mediation if that's the decision of a local agency. So there's ways to dispose of things. I think we were all concerned about every little thing coming to us, and that's not really the situation. I think the other thing, when you think about this, there's no case law because it's all new. There's no real precedent. So the thing they drilled in us were 3 points that I haven't forgotten is you got to be fair. You got to call balls and strikes, and you got to be consistent. So I could look any of you in the face, and we might disagree, but if you know in my heart that I'm doing the best I can, hopefully we come up with the right decision. But that really stuck with me. Mm-hmm. The other thing that impressed me was how de-escalation and escalation goes both ways. It's not always the officer, certainly. Sometimes it's the other side. So you have to understand that. You have to understand going in about the biases that we all have, and you have to deal with that stuff. It's real. I thought the virtual reality scenarios were awesome. And I think the point of that was to put you into the position of what a police officer has to deal with very quickly. Sometimes it's split second. The one case was split second stuff, but I don't want to get into them because, they told us not to talk about it a lot, but the one, just a guy going for his cell phone that was stuck in his back pocket. And you got to react like that. Now, I didn't shoot anybody, so I thought I did okay. But it was good. Instructors had a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. They were obviously had a lot of experience. The other thing is, they're there as a resource. So we've had questions. I don't know, you guys probably know Wayne Silver, who's the main guy, and he did a really good job. The experience of Friday was good because we got to kind of work through cases as a group. We knew we were going to have a case, and as it came out, we came up with our answer, and we kind of were kind of in the norm of what the decision should be. So overall, I came out of it with a lot of, I'm certainly no expert, but probably more than 99% of the people that haven't been through it, because it's all new. Maryland's kind of like in the spotlight of the country because this is really a new process, and you've got every county has their folks, and if you don't have good folks doing it, making decisions for the right reasons, it could be not so good.
Right.
So hopefully we have, I think, a good group of people that are, having gone through the first case together. It was a good, honest, open discussion, and we ended up with a decision that we all could live with. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it was a productive training, and dealing with it for the first time, worked out really well.
Agreed. So just the little funny story. So we had two scenarios in the virtual reality. I just like to tell stories, so that's really why I'm forcing you to listen to me. But the second one was the one that Tom alluded to, where someone had a cell phone and, you couldn't really see what he was doing, and then he whipped it out. And so, of course, we all had our, now, here I am. I've never, the last gun I shot was when I was a kid in 4-H, and we did BB gun training. I still have an NRA trophy for that, which, but, so that was the last time. So they give us these
Like a Glock.
Yeah, like a Glock. And so you start, before they hit you with the scenarios, they have you on the gun range. And so, and the target is coming at you, and they're like, okay, aim at the center of the target. So I've got my gun up, and I'm like pulling the trigger. And Dave in my ear says, okay, Stacy, I can hear that you're pulling the trigger, but you have to pull it a little harder. So I'm like, so I really pulled, and it kicked back, and a fake shell was out, and I just went, whoa! And he was like, yeah. And I said, oh, okay, now I get it. So, but that's just a little window. I had no idea that it was that, the gun is heavy. That's a heavy gun. So anyway, that was, for me personally, a little entertaining. And then in the scenario, when we got together, so the groups that we were with, we had a batch from Cecil County, we had a batch from Washington County, and then we had a few other random folks from other jurisdictions in our collective large group. And I don't know what other jurisdictions did, although there was a lot of joking about, who shot the guy and who didn't shoot the guy. But we had to write these narratives. So in my narrative, I wrote, because the scenario from my own individual experience was, I had my weapon drawn, but as soon as I saw it was a cell phone, I dropped my weapon, but I'm over the top. I'm like, I'm a grandma. So, and this was a person that was having a mental health crisis. And so he said, I have every right to film you. And so I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. At which point he then sat down and said, okay, I'm ready to go to the hospital. But from my perspective, when I was writing it out, I wrote out the narrative, like I lowered my weapon. He sat down and said he was ready to go to the hospital, and I said to him, look, I'm really sorry I drew my weapon on you. And Wayne Silver was reading it, and he just kind of chuckled. And I said, what are you laughing at? And he said, you're just adorable. So that was my fun takeaway moment from that. But what that training did was really give us just a tiny little taste of what it's like to try and make those decisions when you've got a lot of visual and auditory stimulus coming at you, and you've got to make those choices in the moment. And so from that point, I thought it was good. It was helpful. Okay, so enough about that. So turning to, on our agenda today, really what I wanted to bring you up to date on ACC matters so that everybody knows kind of where we are with that. We've got our next meeting. And so now I'll turn to the agencies and hear from you in terms of what has happened since we had our last meeting, if you've had any incidents that came up, that if you've got anything in the hopper for the ACC, let me know that, and that'll give us the heads up so that we know we've got a case coming. And also, I wanted to let you know that we're working, obviously Sheriff's Department is kind of the biggest agency, and so we've had some dialogue back and forth in terms of just the logistics of how do we do this, how do we present this information, and how do we disseminate it to the members of the ACC and all that. So I just want to let the other municipal agencies know that we've had that conversation, and we're happy to kind of bring you into the loop on that. If you have questions about how do we, just like, how does this work? Let us know, and we can chat with you about that, either on the record, off the record, and I'm sure Lieutenant Dibble-Bliss will have his own, information from his end of things, since he's the one that's putting it together. What does it look like from his end to do that and present that case to us? So just know that you know, we're here as like a resource for you. So I'll just go down the line, and Chief Ledwell, thank you for this. So Chief Ledwell has presented us with basically a list of everything that's gone on since the last meeting from your agency standpoint. This is really helpful to me when I go to put together the annual report for the PAB, because it gives me a little bit of statistical analysis, which, as we know, people always like to have statistical analysis as to what happens. So to the extent that you have the capacity within your agency to do like a little bullet point, great. If you can't, I understand, because everybody's tapped out. So, but I just throw that out there. So I'll let you go first and kind of bring us
Sure.
up to date, and anything that you have that might be coming, you know, down the pipeline for ACC as well.
Sure. So we do have one,
Okay,
and it's listed on here as an internal investigation.
okay, all
So
right,
once we complete the investigation, we'll be in
Gotcha.
contact with the
all
ACC
right, great.
for that process. We also are in the process of scheduling a trial board for a
Okay.
case that was from last year.
Right,
And that's not an ACC case, but it will obviously
will be
utilize
going
the
to trial
trial board. So all the logistics have been worked out on that trial board, and I
Good.
know the prosecuting attorney for our department is working on scheduling it
Okay.
at this point.
great.
As you can see from our statistics, it's been a busy quarter.
Yeah, it sure
Um,
has.
I'll actually start at the bottom section. That's just something that we do administratively. We track our arrests when we don't book somebody. We track all of our investigative detentions, and then we track all of our searches that involve one of the warrantless search exceptions. So that's really all that is. In addition to the police report that the officer completes, the supervisor then initiates an administrative review that goes all the way up through me. And it just makes sure that we're policing best practice.
Right.
That we can identify an issue if it occurs and take corrective action before it becomes something. So that's what the final section is in there. Above that, our use of force reports. This is an unusual number of use of force incidents, all within policy, following review. And one thing that you mentioned with looking at the body-worn camera footage with the sheriff's office case, I think the footage is very telling, and I think our review of the cases that we've looked at with these uses of force, our officers are using extraordinary patience, de-escalation skills. I think they're doing an exceptional job with all of that. If you look at how we have it listed, on the left is the sequential order. That's our tracking mechanism, the date it occurred. The type of force, the primary type is listed there for you. Then our finding would be either it's within policy or not within policy.
Right.
And then a few notes regarding what the facts of the use of force involved. The second to last one involved multiple agencies. That was the one that occurred in the hospital ER waiting room, but the gentleman actually showed up there with a shotgun, a loaded shotgun. So we responded as a backup agency to that. But if you have any questions about any of these uses of force, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, this is helpful. It's
Okay.
very good.
And then the top section, we not only track our internal investigations, but we track everything, both an inquiry and a complaint that we get, and we keep a sequential tracking mechanism of that. And the reason we do that is so that we can provide answers if anybody questions us or says, hey, you didn't do this or you did that with our issue. We can go back and we can say, okay, here's how it was handled, and here's what actually happened. And
Right.
so we keep that. So you'll see that I'll write that it was either externally generated or internally generated, and whether it was just an inquiry or whether we considered it a complaint of misconduct. So that's what those are. And then under the finding, you'll see the outcome. Several of these involved are dispatchers. The only external complaint that is an investigation is the final one, and that's the one I spoke of.
Okay,
So that's the one that will be coming to the ACC once
Gotcha.
we complete that
okay,
finding.
okay.
And then
Do you think it'll be at our June meeting or later?
we should wrap it up quickly. It's
Okay.
not a complicated
Okay, all right,
case.
great, thank you.
And so a couple other real quick points. We have the Apex virtual reality system that you guys used at MPTC.
Okay.
So we acquired that so that we could put our officers through scenario-based training. There's a mandate now in the Maryland legislation that we have to do shoot, don't shoot, scenario-based training annually. And so we're going to accomplish that in addition to our in-service training with those Apex. So MPTC staff is coming up, I believe, this month to train our firearms instructors on some of their experience using that system. So we're going to be using it. And the second thing is the headphones schizophrenic hearing is actually something called Hearing Voices.
Right.
Yes.
Which is a
Right.
block of instruction that all of our crisis intervention team training
Yeah,
officers go
yeah.
through.
It was interesting,
So,
yeah, fascinating stuff.
yep. So unless you have any questions for me, that's,
No, thank
have for
you.
you.
Thanks for the update.
No, I forgot
Yeah.
one. This is just food for thought, something to think about, is when we get a case, whether either the sheriff or the chief of the agency wants to make a recommendation along with it.
Right,
In other
right.
words, you do the investigation and you say, this is what I recommend.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have to do that, but certainly it would be helpful.
Yeah, we would find that helpful. And what our intent is, it'll probably depend on the circumstances, but generally, we're just going to keep that recommendation off the table until we make our own decision, and then we'll see if we, how far off the mark we are. Just for our own sort of, we weren't too far, we were pretty close to everybody else when we did our 2 case studies at the training. Some of the other jurisdictions, it was fascinating. There was one that was like, whoo! They went off the rails and down a road and to the, beyond. It was very interesting to see. So I think we're in good shape. All right.
So one question, Madam
Yes.
Chair, if I can. So is there efforts within all the departments to expand the crisis intervention training to all officers? I mean, I think that's probably something we should be thinking about, because it seems to me to be, there's a huge mental health crisis in many of these events. And I know we've had department where individuals are trained and they've made, I mean, it's been a difference. It's been a game changer. So I just.
Yeah, they get a block of it in the police academy, but yeah, the health department works with us every year to put on a full-scale class, even down to the detention center
Right.
deputies, because they're dealing with these folks that we bring in. So yes, there is, but we're all down manpower, and it's not easy to send someone for an extended period of time, so we do the best we can to get everybody trained the way they should. A police academy type of training situation is good, but then you need a little bit of experience understanding what you're looking at for this training to really set in. But yes, there is a concerted effort, and I don't know how
Yeah.
many, I think we've got quite a few.
yeah, well, we've had a lot of turnover, so a lot of unfortunately, our CIT trained officers have moved on. But our goal is to train everybody in CIT. Well, you have to have mental health first aid. That's a prerequisite.
Right.
And you should have some policing experience before you go through that. And it's a 40-week course, so,
Right.
40 hours.
yeah, I'm sorry, 40-hour course, sorry.
I was going to
So-
say, that's a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, that is a lot, yeah.
Should get a degree after that, or something.
Maybe some rotating effort to, I know it's a challenge. I'm not minimizing that, but
Yeah.
I think the more officers we can get, just because of shifts, like then your CIT guys might not be available when things are going on, and so.
And as far as bringing in the instructors, so we have to have specialized instructors who conduct that. And as the sheriff was talking about, a lot of them work for the health department. So what they've done is they schedule an annual CIT entry level, which is the full course.
Okay.
And then they do a monthly refresher where they bring in our officers, because we have to go research on it.
Right.
So they're constantly rotating our officers through the monthly research training, which is a smaller block of instruction. But we have to coordinate that with not only the health department, but there's some nonprofits that bring in individual instructors and people with experience and individuals suffering from some of the mental health disorders. So it takes a lot of logistics to put it together, but we're trying to get everybody trained on it.
Right, good.
Well, whatever we can do to help advocate
right.
for that, if you need more resources or
Exactly.
something, I mean, by all
Exactly.
means, let us know and make
Be
us
a
aware.
little partnership with the health department.
Yeah.
All right, Sheriff DeWeese, I will
So
turn to you.
we were the first case, and I've spoken with most of the chiefs the first ACC case. So our experience was excellent. I thought Lieutenant Devilbus does a good job with preparing the cases.
Absolutely.
The style and manner which we presented the case, I think, was appropriate. It was
It was
more
very
of
helpful.
like a grand jury style
Right.
of presentation. A good question and answer back and forth. It's all there for you. Some of the discussions that we had before that first case was how to secure the files. They're very personal investigations. There's a lot of information in there about individual or individuals, and we wanted to make sure that we just didn't hand over an entire case file and then all of a sudden we don't know where it's at after that. So we had discussions, and I appreciate the fact that you guys went back and forth with us to make sure we laid the groundwork down for future cases
Right.
that come before you. So
We're going to work on that confidentiality agreement too at our next meeting. So
Yeah,
we'll have
so-
something like a tangible form that we'll have.
But overall, and it was Mark that presented it. I don't know that there was anybody else here. I think it was just Mark, and
Yeah, it was.
And he presented the case for you, and the decision that you guys made was exactly what we thought
Oh, okay.
should have taken
Good to
place.
know.
And so our experience overall, I think, was really good.
Good.
I think for us, just it may seem, I guess, monotonous for you to sit here and explain how your training went, but I think it's important that you tell us what you went through, because it tells us that you're serious about this.
Right.
Because these are people's lives that you're dealing with.
Lives.
And there are so many people that, I've heard horror stories around the state, so have my colleagues, about advocates sitting on these boards that are advocating for one thing or another.
Right.
And we just want smart people that understand how to process this stuff, make a good quality decision, and then we move on. So I appreciate the fact that you guys took it seriously, and you're right, you can't replicate what you went through ever again, because all
Right.
5 of you went through it, and
Together.
yeah, and that's just going
Well,
to be a difficult
and,
thing.
I can tell you that just my personal opinion of the 5 of us working together, it just really couldn't have worked out better, because everybody brings their own sort of skill set to this group. And, this one has gotten in on the weeds, and so he's looking at our rules of procedure and policy, which is fabulous. And Dean has an IT, mind, so he's cued into those security concerns. Tambra's a fabulous leader. She would have been here this morning, except she actually had to work. She had to go into work today. So, and Judd and I have kind of that legal component, and so it's a nice team. So I feel very fortunate to have the ACC that we have. So
I think the confidentiality focus that you guys brought to us, Sheriff, was really good, because
Right.
we took that basically and are building it into a confidentiality agreement that we signed.
right,
But if you go further, the law and regulations say that if confidentiality is violated, the commissioners can dismiss us.
right,
It's that serious. So you have to
Right.
go into this knowing that you're talking about personal stuff, you're talking about people's livelihoods, and you got to take it that way. If you don't, you shouldn't be doing this job.
right.
You shouldn't, and I think that this board and the current set of chiefs that we have work so well together. I think that the language, that the opportunity to write policies and procedures that can stand the test of time, regardless of who's
Right.
sitting in your positions and in
Right.
our positions,
That's
to
the
make sure
idea.
this is done fairly, is extremely
Keep it-
important. Yep,
Keep it consistent.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I appreciate you guys taking the training seriously. The way you handled our first case, it wasn't earth-shattering. It was
Right.
it was a case that
Right.
really was a good case for us
It's
to
a
sit
good first case,
and
yeah.
sift through. So, and appropriate, the deputy accepted it, and we're all
Good.
moving on.
Good.
And that's kind of the way it should be handled.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I have nothing for you that's coming.
Okay.
I do have
All
a case that the county's working on for an a trial board, but
Okay.
that's
All right.
nothing that the
Okay.
ACC
Right.
has any worry about. But overall, I appreciate right now how this has been handled up to this point. I don't expect anything different moving forward, so.
Right.
Any
Thanks.
questions of
You have a question here.
Sure.
So one of the things that it says here is to, on a quarterly basis, review outcomes of disciplinary matters considered by the charging committee. So what is our role in that?
Good question.
Right, so,
Well, the outcome was, we made our recommendation as to the appropriate level of disciplinary action, and we forwarded it to the states, or to the sheriff's department. And they then, you know, either, was there any
Yeah, so-
up or down
No.
modification?
So I think the efficiency in how you handled it is equally important.
Right.
There's going to be times when you're going to have to sift through very complex and difficult
Right,
cases.
so it'll
We
take
get
longer
that.
to reach a
But the
decision.
efficiency in getting us the outcome is very, very
Right.
important. And then
So-
that's presented
Right.
to the deputy. After I look at it and Colonel Hart looks at it, and we're fine
Right.
with that
Right.
decision, we don't increase it, then we move
Okay.
on.
So the sheriff's office did not increase that disciplinary level, so, and the officer apparently accepted that disciplinary action, so there's no trial board, so, I don't
There's
know
like-
beyond that.
There's a disciplinary matrix that
Yes,
they
the
use. and
matrix.
so it goes
Right,
from-
yeah, I've
goes
seen-
from
yep.
A to F.
Yes, right,
And, you know,
Right.
F is serious, and A are more common matters.
right,
So when the decision's made, it's within one of those categories, you know, A, B, or C, or whatever. And then within that same category, the chief or sheriff may decide, well, you know, maybe they weren't tough enough.
right,
So you know, you can't take an A and make it an F, but you can make it tougher.
right. So there's
right, no,
some-
I understand that. I'm
Right.
thinking from this board's position is, would we be seeing those outcomes?
No,
Because then how are we going to review that? That's my question is, what is our role here? Because since we're just starting this out, I'm just
Right.
trying to be clear.
Well-
The way it says in the Maryland Code, it says on a quarterly basis, the PAB, right, will review the outcomes of disciplinary matters. I'm assuming this is an outcome of a disciplinary matter, correct?
right.
So would we review that?
You
That's, I'm
would-
just asking.
You're
I'm
not
just-
gonna review, the PAB does not review the case.
Not the case, but the outcome, and I guess what the point of that is to see trends in the outcomes of these cases. And I have no idea if that's
Right.
accurate. We're all learning this on the fly
Yeah.
here, so I'm just asking.
Mr. Burke, got any opinions?
Right, I just want to be
Come join
clear,
us,
like,
come join us
So
at a
I think that, so for your purposes, Ian,
Yeah.
so we do the same thing internally. Mike and I came from the state police, so you could have a barrack on the shore that's disciplining one way, and a barrack out west that's giving the same exact case that
Right.
comes in front of them. So the matrix we've been working with since, a long time. So we've understood matrices since the beginning of time. They were A through E, not F. And we knew D and E's were the most serious. A, B, and C was called summary punishment. We could handle the summary punishment. But what was the consistency part of that? Was a guy or a girl that was doing what this deputy did, if the exact same case existed on the Eastern Shore, were they given a written reprimand, or were they given a day? And was there consistency in punishment, consistency in findings? And I think ultimately, Tim, I think that's what your legislative charge is, to make sure that there's consistency in how these things are being dealt out.
I
Right,
think
so
that's true, and also the board should be aware if every one of these cases ends up in exonerated. I mean, that's something the Police Accountability
Right.
Board would be interested in, I would
Right.
think. So from that standpoint, I think the information is relevant to the Accountability Board.
Well,
Does
and
that make sense?
also, you know, frankly, the review of disciplinary actions, like, we see, you know, the ACC is gonna see this amount. The rest of them are gonna be handled within each department, because they're not matters that come before the ACC as a body. So when we get this kind of information, this is helpful too.
Right.
Because then this allows us to kind of, so that's why like a little bullet point is helpful. That allows us to kind of see like, oh, is there a certain thing that's popping up? Or is there a certain, you know, to identify those patterns. But from this case, the officer was administratively charged. And then, so that was the other part of the training that was extraordinarily helpful in terms of like keeping the flow. And the flow chart, by the way, for the municipal agencies, if you don't already have it on your website, we've got it on the county website now. So, give county attorney's office a call, and we can put you in touch with the IT department and probably get that information to you quickly. But, once we review the case, the ACC reviews the case, we have to decide, are we charging, are we not charging? If we're charging, then we go to the matrix to determine what is the appropriate level of disciplinary action. Then we send our recommendation to the agency to then either bump it up if they feel it's appropriate or go with it. And then the officer gets the opportunity to say, okay, I accept this, or I want a trial board. If we don't administratively charge, then we have various options in that scenario, which are we going to exonerate that officer? Are we going to find that what are the three? There's three
Exonerate,
categories.
There's a number of, I
Unfounded,
mean, yeah, I
and-
think
There we
we've
go.
all read the
Yeah.
matrix
Due to
thing
lack
of
of
it.
training.
Right. And so there are often nuances of situations where it doesn't rise to the level of charging, but there might have been something going on there. So it allows a little wiggle room for us to kind of give that information to the agency when we send back the decision. If we're not charging, we weren't charging because that person didn't have appropriate, officer supervision, and that officer was just following what he or she thought was the appropriate thing, and that was the failure in that scenario. And so that's information that then the agency can take and go, oh, okay, maybe we need to think about how we address that particular situation. But it's going to be, each situation is so unique that it's hard to always say, this is going to happen here and this is going to happen here. But, so we did, in that particular case, administratively charge and recommended, what was the level of disciplinary action that we recommended? Do you
Written
remember?
reprimand.
It was,
Okay.
I think, B or C.
Was it B? Was it a B level?
It was,
I can't
B
remember.
or C,
yeah, it would have been a B. It happened to be a B or C if it was a
Okay.
written reprimand.
Yeah, so we recommended a reprimand.
But the grand jury style of being able to present, I suspect that not, the Prince George's counties, Montgomery counties, Baltimore cities,
May be
they
very
won't,
different,
they won't
yeah.
be able to do that.
Right,
Because
because
there's so
it's-
few
Too many
cases that come
cases.
through here.
Right.
We're able to sit and, Mark knows the case, or your detectives or your investigators
Right.
would know the case inside and out. It's
Right.
presented to the ACC, and we're able to then go through a thumbnail of, hey, chronologically, this is what happened, this is
Right.
what we learned. Judd, being a defense attorney, was able to grill Mark, and so hearsay is admissible in these cases. We were able to get opinions out, what
Right.
we had seen, so there was a really good picture of not only what took place, but also of the deputy themselves.
Yeah,
And
the
what we knew
backstory.
about the deputy
Right.
and the backstory and how this all took place, so that you could have the information. Then you had all the information that you could sift through and review, and then give us the decision. I can tell you, there's no doubt in my mind that's going to be different
Probably not
in the
the
majority
case.
of the counties
Yeah.
throughout the
Right.
state.
What they're probably going to get, so when we did the training, the two scenarios that we did, or the two cases that we reviewed in the training, for one, we just had a written report, right? We just went
Correct.
worked. And then the other one, we had a written report and we also had video camera worn, footage. So that was it. There was no, now we could ask questions.
Well, the interesting thing about that case
Yeah.
was, without the camera, you would have thought
You-
it differently. You
right.
read the report and you see the
Right.
body camera, and
It brought a whole new
It was a simple
perspective.
case of a guy for example, was smoking on transit
Public
property.
property, yeah.
So
yeah.
the officer's response in this was, I'm gonna come over there and kick your ass.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first words out of his mouth, and it just went from there. But you wouldn't get the flavor of that from reading the report.
Right.
It's totally different.
Yeah, it
So
was
you're-
fascinating. It was really fascinating. Funny.
The other thing about the results, and this was kind of drilled into us, that officers are concerned because they can't have these records expunged like they could in the past.
Right.
So when you make a finding, either for charge them or not charging them, it's there. So
Even unfounded cases, even
unfounded,
frivolous.
exonerated cases,
Unfounded,
and
yeah.
that's
It's the most
part-
asinine thing I've ever seen, but
Officers
it
are
is what it
really-
is, yep.
Right.
What we heard, with the feedback they're
Right.
getting is officers are really concerned about this. So it's important that if we
Something.
don't charge, that we actually, put that on the record. So somebody that asks for that record or can get access to it at some point can see, okay, they
Right, exactly.
said this didn't happen.
Right. So that's all a long circuitous route to answer the question.
So that didn't answer the question at all.
That didn't answer the question.
So my point being is, we are gonna see, I think we need to see the outcome of these based on what this is saying. So once this outcome's determined, then it will be sent to the accountability board and say, we don't need all the details of the case, I don't think.
Right.
I don't think we're entitled to that based on what I'm seeing here, but
Right.
it says that on a quarterly basis, we will review the outcomes of disciplinary, just the outcome, right? Doesn't say about the whole case or
there's
whatever,
your
or
outcome.
how we came to that outcome.
But I don't know how that
outcome
gives you a
itself.
true picture of what's going on in the police
I
department. if
totally
only-
agree.
If the only thing you're seeing, now Tom's giving you everything that happens in his police
Right.
department.
Yep.
I'm an open book, and I don't know, Rich will tell you how many cases, I give it all to you, and you can
Right.
sit there and look at the outcomes of all my cases. If the law is saying only the outcomes of ACC cases.
That's it.
Then it's very short-sighted
then
in
it's a
in what's
short
going
list.
on.
That's exactly, so I'm trying to just understand, what is our role here? And in the absence of some training for this particular board is a void, right? So I'm thinking if we're trying to figure this out as we go, this might be something, this may eventually develop into one board I can see. I'm not sure that there's a need for two, to be quite honest with you, a PAB and an ACC.
Well, but
Well, then we got to determine those
That's a
separate roles.
legislative job.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but as process goes by, so all I'm just trying to do is identify what is my role in this process. And right now, this says here to review the outcomes of disciplinary matters considered by the charging committee. So like, to your point, it would be very difficult to understand how this came, but to Tim's point, I guess we want to see these because once we start to see, at least a pattern will develop, like you were
Is your-
saying.
I guess is your legislative charge overall accountability of police agencies when it comes to disciplining, or is your legislative charge only matters that deal with the ACC? And those are two
Different
terribly
things.
different
Right.
things when
Very
it comes to
different things.
looking at a police department.
Right.
Right, and I think I'm really trying to figure out what our role is here, if that's okay. I mean, because it just, and again, like I highlighted these, the next one is identifies any trends in the disciplinary process of police officers in the county. And then 2, makes recommendations on changes to policy that would improve police accountability in the county.
Yeah.
Right, so these are kind of our 3 main things beyond appointing a civilian charging committee, right? And then to receive the complaints. But I think I'm kind of trying to just figure out what our
Well, in terms
actual,
of
how do
reviewing,
you actually do this job?
in terms of reviewing from this quarter,
Mm-hmm.
that's it. One case,
But will we get that like in writing or something? We don't actually have like, I mean, I kind of got your thing, but I'm not going to remember this a quarter from now.
well, we can put it in the minutes.
Yeah, so that's the only way we're gonna get it, or are we gonna
Right.
get it and then it'll be something like, I mean, we'll just keep all the minutes and we'll go through that way? Because I'm guessing at
Right.
some annual point, you're gonna look at these things and say, well, this
Yeah.
happened and this happened and this happened, so it would be kind of nice to maybe start creating
Well,
a
I've got it
matrix.
all in this little binder.
Instead of just in the minutes, because if it's just in the minutes, we're gonna have to go back through and scour the minutes for all these things. If we could get like a thing started in the
Well,
beginning of
that's
the year.
my suggestion to, going forward, because this is a work in progress.
Yeah, right, so, yeah.
So this is my suggestion that would be helpful from
Across the
our
board.
end, to then have a little summary from each agency, so think about this for our next quarterly meeting. I'm not gonna make you give it to me in
So,
between
real
that.
quick, Stacy, this is just,
Yeah.
you have to understand that
Yeah, from your department, I think.
if I'm
it's
not
gonna be-
mandated to give that to you, I'm not giving it to
Right.
you. So what are, and I'm not saying that I'm gonna do that.
Right.
I'm just saying if we don't put what they're supposed to be doing and what overall is supposed to happen in some sort of policy and agreement amongst us all, I'm
Right.
just gonna give you what I'm mandated to give you. I'm not
Exactly.
mandated to give you all this.
Yeah.
Just
So-
what is ACC matters.
I'm gonna tap Mr. Burke. Let's work on figuring out, from a legislative intent perspective, and maybe other jurisdictions, what are they collecting in terms of information from the agencies?
Yes, just a note, I've met with some other county attorneys, and
Okay,
one of the
good.
complaints of their police accountability boards is, we don't have anything to do. So everybody's struggling with
Yeah.
what the roles are between
Right.
the two bodies and what
Right.
the duties of the Police Accountability Board
Yeah.
are. And again, as you read, the law is not particularly enlightening in this area.
Right. They didn't answer all the questions clearly before they passed the statute. And so we're,
Well, what I would like to do is, instead of having the individual departments, I'd like to create kind of our own one of these versions for us, just
Right.
for us to track it. So when this disciplinary matter, this will be our first one. It'll be boop,
right,
2023,
right,
this, and there's what the outcome was.
yeah.
That's all this says. I don't know what that, beyond that, I don't know what that means.
Right.
And I don't know what value
Right.
it'll be. We'll
Well,
figure
and
that
the-
out as we go through. Obviously,
And
the
bottom line
legislation
is,
has.
again, this is just starting, so we
Yes.
don't, and we're a small jurisdiction. Carroll County is a smaller jurisdiction. So we're not gonna have the same level of, review that Anne Arundel County is gonna have, that Montgomery
Correct.
County.
And I'm guessing as the legislative intent develops, that's when we can figure out what was their intent of this, then we'll at least have the stuff
An
to.
idea.
Yeah,
And you were in this business a little bit.
Yeah.
Finding what their intent is
Intent is
on anything is
Absolutely.
possible.
I'll talk to
yeah.
some legislators and try to figure out what on
Right.
God's green earth
Right.
what do you want from
Yeah.
us?
Well, they said they were getting feedback because people thought the PABs were
Right,
supposed to do what the ACC does.
Right.
Correct.
So a lot of people put their hand up and said, I want to be on the PAB.
right,
When they got appointed to the PAB, it was like buyer's remorse. I didn't really want to do that. I really wanted to do what Baird's
wanted
doing.
to, right, right.
So I think what you're saying is what I talked about earlier, it's all new, there's no precedent, there's
Mm-hmm.
no case law, there's no nothing. So what we create is something that has to work with all these people.
Right.
I don't
And
think
has
we're
to-
gonna have a lot of cases.
No, we don't
ACC
either.
cases
Yeah, right.
here,
Oh, and I'm perfectly happy not having less work
Oh,
to do.
Right,
I'm-
right.
So don't misunderstand that. I'm just
Yeah.
making sure I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to, because I don't want somebody to come up later and say, you were supposed to review that. And I'm like, what?
I mean, if you go to some of the PABs, they're, I'm not suggesting this, so don't misread me. They're going out and doing public hearings, and they're doing all this stuff. They have very high-paid staff.
Right, it's a
and
different scenario.
They haven't done one ACC case. Okay? But there's an annual report requirement for the PAB to report kind of
trends.
What happened?
trends, any
Right.
And
recommendations.
to Ian's
things
point,
like
it's
that.
very difficult to do that with one case a year that comes
Right.
before. So the question, I think the intent thing needs to be answered, because if we have a form where it's like, okay, it didn't come before, but we see a trend in
Right,
dispatcher issues or something, then at least there's a
Right.
noted trend. It's not an ACC
right.
issue.
And so maybe one way we can do that is to make it a summary. I don't know, we'll work on it. We'll work on it.
I think also,
gonna answer it
to
today.
the law is, I think you're not going to see it in Carroll County as much, is that citizens can complain directly to the PAB.
Sure.
And I think that occurs when there's a
Right.
lack of trust within the police agencies.
Right.
So if they feel like, I can't go to Chief Ledwell and make a
And
complaint.
have a response of some
So I'm
sort,
going to go
yes.
to the PAB and make a complaint, and then there's a process for how that's handled, it goes to the ACC, et cetera. So we haven't had any of those
Right.
occur here, so that's
Right.
probably why there's a lack of
Yeah, yeah. Agreed.
activity.
Right. All right. I'm going to let Sykesville go next and tell us what's happening down there. Good morning. How you
Yes,
doing?
not too much, just a couple of quick updates.
All right.
We realized we had a glitch in our IA Pro, which I think is what Tom uses for, many of the other departments use it for our internal affairs tracking and
Okay.
our public portal.
Okay.
We set it up so that myself and my lieutenant would receive an email anytime somebody went on the public portal and made a complaint or compliment. And we found out that that wasn't happening. And the reason we found that out was we had 2 compliments on our portal, as well as 1 complaint about a parking violation that we hadn't addressed. And we were like, oh my God, they've been on there for
Right.
like a month or 2.
Right.
So we fixed that glitch. So now we've already tested it. Now, anytime somebody goes on the public portal and makes a complaint or a compliment,
Get it.
we'll get notified of it.
Right.
And that'll allow us to address it in a more timely fashion. So that's a good thing. In terms of discipline, really nothing significant. We had a few minor in-house incidents that we dealt with. One involved employee grooming. Once a trooper, always a trooper, right? If somebody didn't shave when they were supposed to, and so we dealt with that internally. And another complaint, or internal review of employee patrol vehicle operation
Okay.
that we dealt with internally, so.
Okay.
and that-
50 push-ups, I think.
Yes,
yeah,
50 push-ups and.
Some burpees.
Yeah.
No, they were good, yeah.
But no, that's really all that I
Okay.
have from beautiful
All right.
downtown Sykesville.
All right, great. Well, that's always good. All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody this morning?
Good.
Good.
Good. What's
Safest
happening
to
in your
say, right
world?
now, we've had no citizen-generated complaints,
Great.
and we hope to keep it that way. I have something under review, and I'll be probably talking to some of you folks later.
Okay.
In reference to that,
Okay.
for a little guidance.
Okay.
But besides that, that's about it.
Okay. Good. Any other disciplinary actions that are
No.
hopping in yours? Okay.
No.
All right.
And I have no updates and nothing to bring forward.
Okay.
Nothing to report.
All right. All is quiet. Okay. Great. Any questions from any of you as to anything we're doing, either ACC or PAB, things that we can help you with? General, yes.
For the pending case that we're going to be submitting to the ACC,
Yes.
logistically, how is that sent? I know you've worked on some
Right.
flow charts.
So, we do not have secure emails yet, the ACC members. So I'm gonna, tap Lieutenant Doublebiss to maybe talk to you about what he did and how he came and did a presentation. So it was grand jury style, where he had reports, he had, the video footage, he gave us insight as to additional witness testimony that was given to him. And that was very helpful, because he was there, we could, pick his brain, ask him questions about things that were not necessarily written word for word in the report, but that were information that was helpful to us in coming to a decision. So I don't know if you have do you have an internal affairs investigator, correct? In the
Correct.
city, okay. So maybe have that person.
So that's scheduled at your
So our
ACC
next,
meeting?
right, our next meeting is June 21st. So if your investigation is completed and ready to go, that's when we'll,
So I'll just
review
shoot you
that.
an email and let you know whether that's going to occur or not, then
Yeah.
you can plan for it.
Right,
And then,
right.
okay.
Right. And the county sets us up in a room where we've got the tech equipment, so we can, we'll have a screen to display if there is any video footage that goes along with it, or audio for that matter, because some of it we had was audio recorded. So anything that you need in terms of tech support for that, just, I'll communicate with Mr. Burke, but, keep us in the loop on that, and we can get that set up for you.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
All right. Anybody else have any other matters for the good of the order?
That's for maybe my folks, Mark or anybody?
Yeah?
Good.
Okay. Mr. Burke, anything to add?
Yes, I wanted to give the chiefs and the sheriff an update on the trial board process. The county has signed the contract with the Office of Administrative Hearings in Hunt Valley. They're going to provide the administrative law judge for these trial boards. We looked for a retired judge, there just aren't any. So they charge $200 an hour, the county picks that up. The trial boards will be in probably Hunt Valley. Remember, we used to do the traffic tickets and all that stuff there. They have all the equipment, that probably makes sense, they probably have all the equipment you need in video. So I signed the contract, and I contacted them last week, and they're gonna get me back this week, a signed contract. I'll get a hold of you two, I guess you have stuff pending, and I'll get you the contact information for Mr. Fry, who's our county trial board member, and I guess you guys can work with OAH and get it set up. Does that make sense? So, again, it's $200 an hour, so be brief.
Well, and the other part of what we can do as a PAB, now that I've got a better handle on all this jazz, is the next time we have a budget hearing with the county, Mr. Burke asked me to come and sit in, so I went, I had my grandson with me because I was on grandma duty that day, so hopefully he won a few points. But, the county commissioners need to understand that all this stuff takes money. And from the agency's perspective, especially the smaller agencies, they don't have the money to come up with all the tech and all of the, paying of the, if there's a mediation fee, even if you use the mediation. Now, the state is apparently working on coming up with some free mediation programs, but if it doesn't rise to the level of going to the ACC but you need a mediator, you still gotta, So I think that that's gonna be an ongoing conversation that we, as the POB, can be in the role of saying, hey, how about creating a pool of funding so that when they need additional, crisis intervention training, there's a pot of money there that the agencies, the law enforcement agencies can tap into and, make those programs happen. So, I mean, that's kind of where I view our role, frankly, as,
Resource support as well.
yeah, let's see what those on the ground need to make their jobs better so that then it, the accompanying benefit to that is that allows the citizens to go, oh, okay, now we've got some folks who get this mental health thing. Great. It's challenging. And that is not just Carroll County, that is countrywide in terms of law enforcement. So, I've been doing a lot of reading lately and all this stuff, and
I
it's
think
been,
the board needs to understand that when these go to a trial board,
yeah,
they look a lot like a district court or a circuit court hearing, whether
Right.
it's a DUI, a murder case or whatever. It's just that the rules of evidence are slightly different than what is allowed. But
Right.
like Tom's got the city of Westminster has to hire an attorney to prosecute it.
exactly.
Tim has to hire an attorney or he's got an attorney internally that prosecutes my case.
Right.
Then the AHO gets their money because even beforehand, there's motions of things that are acceptable, statements, those sort of things that a defense attorney can challenge.
Right. It's
And so
like
there's
litigation, and
there's
litigation
a
is
lot that goes on
expensive.
before the actual hearing takes
Right.
place, and it is expensive.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot is a deputy officer or trooper knows that these things take an awful lot of time to put together, and maybe up until the day of the case, they'll walk in and resign. And we've already spent thousands and thousands of dollars getting it to this point, and then they resign, and in some cases, they'll go forward. I have not had a trial board in almost 9 years I've been sheriff. I don't think any of these guys have had a trial board. They're just few and far between. But what has happened with all this legislation that has taken place is that deputies, officers, troopers will now all but seek a trial board. We were surprised that after the ACC case that our guy even took the discipline
I'm glad. I'm
and
glad
not
that
gone
worked
to
out.
right and not gone
Really
to a
glad that
trial
worked
board.
out. Yeah.
But it is not an easy process
Right.
for any of us to put together, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So you're right on my end. So the county is paying for the AHO, but it's not paying for their attorneys
Mm-hmm. Right.
when they've got to prosecute a case on one of their officers. They're going to have to find an attorney
Mm-hmm.
externally to prosecute that case.
Well, and one of the mandates was for the county to create a budget for this. That was one of the legislative mandates. I'd ask you when I first started, like, hey, what's the budget? And we don't have, so they're supposed to create a budget. Obviously, they may have created one at zero, but that's
But
obviously
there are
not
jurisdictions
appropriate.
that did create the budget, like
Right.
Stacy said, and put
Right.
$160,000, $170,000 a year employees in there.
Yeah.
But they did not create budgets for prosecuting or
the
even looking at these cases when they find,
tangentials.
yep, they have no clue
Right.
what
But I
they're.
think that's a very important point is for our role to be to find out, like, because, and personally, in my opinion, if we can get some mental health additional crisis intervention training, and you guys could use that resource, but if you needed the money to facilitate that, I mean, that's where, that's one of the things that should be on the radar, saying, hey, more crisis training could happen if we had more dollars.
Right.
So I don't know, but
Right.
that's one of the things,
Agreed.
so they need to get a budget. There needs to be some funds for this thing, so.
Yeah, so think about that too, for maybe the next quarterly meeting. Are there programs, and how much would you need, so that we can begin kind of putting together an idea of the next budget cycle, what we would want to present to the commissioners, not
That
they'll-
almost needs to be
Yeah.
at the next meeting,
Yeah.
because the way
Yeah.
budgets work.
Right.
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Burke has a,
We actually will have a budget in July of $15,000. The board members will get a stipend of, was it $125?
yeah, I think that's what
Per
you're.
meeting.
Yeah.
So we're getting there.
Okay.
Right, but in terms of, from our standpoint, maybe working to request, like
A pot of money.
pot of money, you know, a fund of some sort that could be set aside for maybe grants to individual municipalities. I don't know, we can talk about that. We can think about that. But that
I
would
guess
be,
the next question is, when would you need that? Because I know from our perspective, you needed budget items in like September if you really wanted to consider.
They usually address all that in around December, but, so it would have to be, unfortunately,
Through
it'd have
the
to be
county.
Tim's
Right,
office.
Yeah.
That makes the budget request. It
Right.
wouldn't be me, or it wouldn't be HR or anything like that. It would have to come through
right.
Tim's
It's gonna
office.
go
Yeah, that's
through.
absolutely, that's why I was asking, when would you need that for you
Next
to?
meeting then.
Next year.
Next meeting? I mean, preferably? Okay. All right, so yeah, if you guys can
Yeah.
think of stuff where. that
So,
might
you
be-
know, if there are certain things that are out there that would be helpful, let us know. And we're happy to work on it. Anybody else have anything?
I just got two other quick things. So you're saying the county has this citizen
Yes, that's on the
complaint process
website.
on the website now?
If you go to the Police Accountability Board, you'll see, or the Charging Committee, either one, you'll see that there are, the flow chart is on there. There are links back and forth, all the minutes are on there. So, yeah, check the county website.
That's the Carroll County website. It's on the Carroll.
Yeah.
And then last of all, last question for me, is the process for filing complaints and the time frame of outcomes posted on all your guys' websites and stuff, I guess?
Well, before we started, I let everybody know that if they need that flow chart, and the flow chart is pretty good in terms of, it's pretty basic. I think it's helpful from a citizen standpoint to see what actually happens when they file a complaint. So if you don't have it on your website and you want it, let Mr. Burke's office know, and they can put you in touch with IT and get that so that you can adopt that. The complaint forms, I know we talked about that the last time. You know, I reviewed the ones that everybody sent me. They all have the basic information, and that's all you need on your complaint form, is really just the basic information. You don't need a lot of detail. And so I'm less concerned about there being one complaint form for all, you know, like a universal complaint form. I think what all the municipal forces have in place currently is adequate. I mean, it meets, it's just like the one that we have on the website.
Right, yeah, I'm just trying to, again,
This
just
one.
Yeah, there's one
trying
on
to
the website,
follow up on
right.
what this thing said. And it said, the process for filing complaints and a time frame for outcomes will be posted in a public area of each agency and on the agency's website if it maintains one.
Right.
Boom.
So,
So I
done.
was just asking if everybody's thinking
We're
about
all required to have our policies online
Right.
as well, and
Right.
all of our policies contain that information.
That information.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if you go on the websites, because I went through the exercise, so I've got it in my handy dandy folder, but yeah, you can
Okay.
find that
Awesome.
information.
Okay, I think that's all I got.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Any update on how we communicate to the public? Or is it just those that happen to go on the website and look around? Or is there going to be any other form of
Yeah.
communication or education for the public?
Not that I'm aware of, unless anybody has a specific plan, what that might look like. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.
Great, yeah, thank you guys, appreciate everything.
Yeah. I'll see you in a few months. Our next meeting, oh yeah, our next meeting is, next PAB meeting is September 11th at 10 o'clock, this room.
I'm sorry, September?